Hey guys, theyre here back with another Last Epoch video. So today we're going to have a look at a quick breakdown of the strongest Paladin build I have ever seen in Last Epoch, and perhaps one of the strongest builds in the game currently. Now this YouTube video is shown by a content creator, Iva Markova. Just a quick shout out, I'll leave a link in the description down below to their video. You'll find the build planner in that video. Now their build has near min-max gear and they're pushing past 2200 corruption, which is pure insanity. Now, I've done a video breaking down how to scale damage on Paladin. This build is the perfect example of how to build a Paladin. So let's quickly break down why this build is so strong. Now, I've got the build planner open at the moment. So let's look at what are the factors that make this build so strong. On paper, this build doesn't look crazy, but what we do notice straight away, like you've got basic stats, health is not too high, move speed is decent, we have not that much armor on the gear, but what we do see in the video is that this build has insane damage and insane ward. So building up tons of ward and also doing tons of damage. That's what we do see in the video. So there's 4 factors making this build very tanky and very strong. So one is ward and ward retention. The second is healing effectiveness. Third is cast speed. And then the fourth is the damage. So we've got crit chance, a lot of crit chance, and fire damage in the build. So what you will notice in the resistances is the resistances are fully capped, but not only that, cold resist is insanely high. 454 cold resist. Now, why has this build so much cold resist? Well, we can look at this particular item, the Frostbite Shackles. This item gives you chance to apply Frostbite on hit, which is an ailment. So you can apply tons of freeze. Whilst you're freezing, you gain ward and you gain ward retention. So this build gives tons and tons of ward retention, meaning that the ward that's being built up is being retained more often. You'll also notice that this item, because it's fully geared, fully maxed out, you'll see that they've got cast speed on the gear. We also have 2 Ashes of Mortality rings. Ashes of Mortality in this particular build gives everything you need. It has a chance to grant ward. It also grants increased cast speed, ward retention, and fire damage. And you can see that the implicits also have fire damage on it. Plus they've rolled attunement and healing effectiveness. So this is beefing the amount of healing effectiveness that they're going to get. They've got the Foot of the Mountain boots. Intelligence as a stat gives ward retention, and we've got attunement as well. Attunement as a stat gives healing effectiveness for paladins. They've got endurance for insane tankiness and all attributes. So this is plus 12 to attunement, plus 12 to intelligence, plus 12 to strength, giving more armor. And those 3 are the main stats that you need for this build. Also, they've got that extra bit where it gives 100% dodge rating to endurance threshold, and of course the 12 stats on the dexterity will give dodge rating, which gives a little bit of endurance threshold. In terms of the belts, they've rolled cold resist on their implicits with fire damage, cold resistance, cooldown reduction, and health. On their body armor, they've rolled the implicits give fire damage, endurance, and armor. They've rolled attunement, fire damage, health, and cold resist. So again, the 4 stats that are necessary for this build to be made. They've gotten a lot of ward retention, so intelligence is one of those factors with ward retention. Attunement gives healing effectiveness, fire damage, also increasing the amount of damage that you can do with this build. Now they've rolled cast speed and healing effectiveness on every single piece that will allow it. They've gotten cold resist on every single piece that will allow it as well. So you can see cast speed on the relic, cast speed on the Mad Alchemist Ladle, and again, the spell damage on paper for Mad Alchemist Ladle is very low, but in practice, this skill deals damage based on how many negative ailments are on the target. So you can see it gains 6% more spell damage per negative ailment on target up to 8. And so 6 times 8 is 48% more spell damage, plus 1% more cast speed per 2 intelligence. This item gives tons of cast speed, just purely based on the amount of fire penetration, fire damage, cast speed, and spell damage on this item. Really crazy. And then also they've got the Scales of theyre. Now, on Scales of theyre, again, they've got everything that you could possibly want on this particular build. You've got Intelligence for ward retention, Spell crit chance, increased crit chance, cast speed, increased cast speed, Attunement, and Intelligence. This item is insane. So if we look at the offensive stats, you can see they have almost 200% increased cast speed. They've got 57% spell crit chance. So they're critting almost every second hit. Again, this spell damage is low on paper because the amount of spell damage that you do with Mad Alchemist Ladle is dependent on the negative modifiers on the enemy. In terms of defense, you can see they have 690% ward retention. This is a ton of ward retention, so they can build up ward very, very quickly. And the amount of healing effectiveness, 1061 healing effectiveness. So let's talk about what is making this build so damn tanky. So first, we have a ton of ward retention and we have a ton of healing effectiveness. This is because of Healing Hands. Now, because they're investing in Healing Hands as a spell, they don't need to invest nodes into making the Healing Hands a melee skill, nor they have to invest nodes into making Healing Hands cast upon melee hit. So this takes out a lot of points that is unnecessary. Instead, they can opt to go for more spell damage. So here we have Bane of Evil with Healing Hands. So let's look at the Divine Barrier interaction that makes this build so tanky. Now, the interaction is between this node on Healing Hands. Healing Hands will grant ward, and this affix. So 6 to 7% of current health lost per second, and 6 to 7% of missing health gained as ward per second. This interaction makes it so that you can stack up ward because your Healing Hands will overheal and turn into ward instead. Going a bit further, we have nodes that increase healing effectiveness and cast Healing Hands upon yourself, increase healing effectiveness, and the upfront healing node is actually very strong because it scales with healing effectiveness as well. So with the amount of healing effectiveness that you have, Healing Hands itself has a base healing amount, plus you've got the upfront healing of this node. Pair that with all the healing effectiveness, increased 1000% healing effectiveness, and when you cast one Healing Hands, you're going to gain thousands of ward. We've also got reduced mana cost of Healing Hands. And then the other part of the damage that's done is with this node here, the Divine Catalyst node, which casts a Divine Bolt. Now, this particular node will only cast the Divine Bolt if you heal yourself. So because you're healing yourself and gaining ward, this node procs. And so you'll see tons of Divine Bolts flying across the screen. But normally this interaction doesn't work if you don't have this node. So this node here is dealing damage because you're healing yourself, quote unquote, heal. And as you heal, you gain ward, and that casts 5 Divine Bolts across the screen. So Divine Bolts by itself scales off of Attunement and increased healing effectiveness. So gaining Attunement is very good for the skill. It also scales off of spell and fire damage. So the amount of spell and fire damage that you have also increases the amount of damage that Divine Bolts does. And this makes it very, very strong and pairs very nicely with this build. On top of that, you have Healing Hands dealing added spell damage at 200% effectiveness and doing fire damage. Again, we have fire damage, crit chance, and spell damage. This node here is crucial. You gain 2 spell damage per 10 healing effectiveness. If you have 1000 healing effectiveness, you're going to get 200 spell damage base. That's insane. And so this is making Healing Hands both your primary damage skill and your primary defensive skill. So now we want to pair that with casting Healing Hands as fast as possible. And that's why this build has 200% cast speed, so that you can pair the damage and defense in one skill. Then on top of that, you have Holy Aura. Holy Aura is one of the best skills on Paladin. It gives everything you need as a Paladin. Gives you attack speed and cast speed, gives you healing effectiveness, gives you a lot of resistances, so 20% poison resist and 25% elemental resist. Again, the elemental resist contributes to the cold resist, and so makes that really good. Then we also have fire penetration and ignite chance, and global fire damage. So again, everything you want on this particular build, Holy Aura will give you. And when you trigger it as well, it's going to double those stats. It also naturally gives you 30% increased damage and 15% additional elemental resist as well. So again, Holy Aura is insane. It's a good skill. Then we have another buff skill, Sigils of Hope. So these two here, Holy Aura and Sigils of Hope, are two buff skills. This node here, gives you increased damage per level of specialized buff skills. Now, we've got 20 points in Holy Aura and 20 points in Sigils of Hope. This gives 1% of damage per level of specialized buff skills based on the combined levels of your specialized buff skills. So you got 20 points in both buff skills. This is 40% increased damage to whole healing hands. And this is multiplicative damage as well. So that's pretty damn insane. Sorry, let's stop there. This is more. So I've just noticed Javelin is a buff skill as well. It says buff as a scaling tag. Again, 20 points in Javelin. Let's see if Lunge is a buff skill. Okay, it says Lunge is not a buff skill, but Javelin, it clearly says in the scaling tags buff. So you're getting 60% increased damage on healing hands because of Javelin as well. Now, they've used Javelin as a traversal skill, but also the battle standard does give you increased damage. And it gives you increased damage per level of attunement and also gives you endurance threshold as well. Again, this is another really good buff skill and traversal skill that you use. It also applies Smite as well for a little bit of extra damage. But the main damage in this build is healing hands. It's coming from healing hands and it's coming from divine bolts as well. And then we've also got the divine barrier node that makes this build incredibly tanky. Then we have Lunge as a defensive and traversal skill as well. And so the entire skill tree here is based on buffing healing hands, because healing hands is going to be both the way of damage and the way of survival. On top of that, we've got the Peak of the Mountain helmet. Again, we've got 4 levels to healing hands with increased healing effectiveness, cold resist, and increase in crit chance. And on the amulet, increased healing effectiveness, crit chance, cold resist, fire penetration. Again, everything you want in this build. With the idols, healing effectiveness, healing effectiveness, healing effectiveness, Throne of Ambition for more fire damage, and armor. So this is pretty much a near min-max build. With the blessings, let's have a quick look at the blessings. So most important things in the blessings, we've got increased crit chance, resistances, got cold resist. Okay, so if you do want to go towards this, make sure you get cold resist. And of course, chance to apply shred to fire resist. So that's my quick look at this particular build. It's awesome that there are content creators out there on YouTube and they're completely destroying the game. Also, if you haven't seen my video on how to build a Paladin, check that link in the description down below as well. As always, have an awesome day. Bye for now.